At least I can talk a little softer today.
Is it on my tutor?
Not yet, no. No, it's not on my tutor yet. I will put it on my tutor over the weekend for you, and I will put the slides for next week on before the time, okay? Because I'm doing them with the other class next week, so I will have done them, okay? All right, so Delphi study. So basically what we are getting into now are the various methodologies that one can use to gather data during your study, right? So can you remember what did we do last time?
Focus groups.
Okay, and what type of study is a focus group? Is it qualitative or quantitative?
Qualitative.
Qualitative, yes. Because in a qualitative, why don't you just send the names around, please? Because in a qualitative study, we ask an open question and we then get an answer to that open question. Right. Now, a Delphi study is also qualitative. So in a Delphi study, we also start with an open question and we then try and get an answer to that open question. Right. Now, when you do your research design, you need to be aware of all of these different methodologies that are at your disposal, okay? And you need to choose the methodology that is going to work the best for your study, okay? So if you have to choose between a Delphi study and a focus group, both of them are qualitative and both of them start with a question, okay? So basically, if you're busy with a study where you want qualitative data, both of them can work. But the main difference is that with a focus group, you get all the participants in one room at one time. Okay? So that means that your participants have to be geographically co-located. So they have to be in the same place. And the advantage of the focus group of the Delphi study over the focus group then is that you can do a Delphi study electronically. But so now, of course, if I want to do a study with parents in the Cape Town community, would I be able to use a Delphi?
No.
Okay, because they don't have access to computers. But they are co-located, so if I go to them, I can get them all in one place, and so a focus group would be a better way to answer the open question. There's something... Okay, so does everybody understand that both of them are quantitative type of studies, but it depends on your audience. So not just whether they're co-located or not, but also the level of sophistication. Okay, so you cannot do an electronic survey with people that do not have computers and are probably functionally illiterate. I did an ethics course this week, and what they said on the ethics course is that in South Africa, when you do research with the general population, you should have your questionnaire or your instrument written at grade 5 level English. Okay, so you understand, I couldn't use words like co-located and geographical and, you know, I would have to say it in the same place. Yesterday at the FHDC, which is the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee, where we approve proposals and questionnaires and things like that, we got a questionnaire that was intended for the prison services, and they wanted to ask 700 people in the prison services to complete the questionnaire. So you would be talking about people like prison guards and so on. And so the one question was, do you think that emotional intelligence is important in your environment?
Sure.
Do
It's
you
like
think
I
that they
agree,
would
but
be able to understand that?
no chance.
Okay, so we sent the questionnaire back and we said, sorry, you cannot collect data with this questionnaire because it's not written at the correct level. Alright. Okay, so these are the practical things. And so the next thing that we, or the two other main methodologies that we focus on in this course is survey research. Now, survey research is simple. Most of you have participated in a survey sometime in your life. Am I right? Okay, so that's basically where you just get a questionnaire and you fill it in, like the census. Okay, and then the other thing that we're also going to do then next week is the case study. Right, and that is an interesting animal because something like information from a Delphi study or information from interviews or from a focus group can all be used together in a case study. Right. So case study is also a qualitative method that we use. Right, so to get to the Delphi, we would then, sorry, to just then get back to our example of Kliptown. If I want to ask the donors, the people that donate money to Kliptown, a qualitative question, do you think that a Delphi study would work?
Yeah.
Why?
It's a good. Because usually donors, they do have facilities first of all.
Yes.
In their level of
Computer literacy.
I don't know how to be politically correct, how to put it, but yes, is reasonable.
Okay, all right.
From average to high actually.
Okay, and most of the donors of Kliptown sit in Europe and in the United States. So, would it be possible to do a focus group?
No, because you're not going to get them in one.
Okay,
area.
so do you see there's different applications for the different methodologies, and that's why we teach you the different methodologies. Okay, so at the end of this, you should be able to design a research question for a Delphi study, and you should be able to conduct a Delphi study. Okay, so some of this I've already discussed. So there are various group decision-making techniques, and the main ones that we focus on in this course, because they work very well, especially in project management research, is the focus group and the Delphi. And you use them in situations where individual judgments must be tapped and combined to arrive at decisions that cannot be calculated by one person. So remember when we spoke about the Delphi, we also spoke about the focus group, we also spoke about the definition of an expert. Okay, so who is the expert? And in the Delphi, exactly the same criteria are important in terms of the definition of an expert. Okay, so here is just the interacting group method versus the Delphi. So interacting group method is where we just do normal brainstorming. So I walk into the room and I say to you, what are the important factors, or how should you measure project success in a community service project? And Mpuzile has strong opinions and she isn't scared to talk in class, so she's going to give me an answer. Mbali is just going to look down like this. Tinus is going to work on his computer. Mdu will sit there quietly in the back and smile at me. Okay, so do you see that with brainstorming, as we said when we discussed the focus group, the problem with that is you get direct confrontation, which leads to hasty formulation of preconceived ideas, inclination to close the mind to new ideas, tendency to defend standpoints, or predisposition to change based on others' persuasion. So Phumzile is confident and she's going to stand by her standpoint, and so then everybody's going to say, yeah, she's right, even though they might not agree. Or it might also be in a situation where Phumzile is the senior person of the organization, so whatever she says goes, and nobody else will then participate. Okay, so in order to avoid that, we use things like the focus group and the Delphi. And the Delphi specifically is more conducive to independent thought, and it aids in the gradual formulation of a considered opinion. And you will see why as we go along. Okay, so the similarities between the focus group and the Delphi is that it's about independent individual work for idea generation. You then pool the judgments of the individuals, and you then evaluate the ideas. Remember when we did the focus group, we then drew that fishbone diagram where we then evaluated the ideas. Do you remember that? I know it's long ago, but okay. And you then also get more balanced participation between members because everybody's voice is heard. And it's the same thing in a Delphi, because in a Delphi, if I was involving all of you in a Delphi, I would send you the question, and the question would be how would you measure project success in a community service project? And all of you will then give me what your ideas are, right? And then with the focus group, we didn't really put so much emphasis on the mathematical voting techniques. But there are techniques where you can ask people, okay, what are your top factors, and so on and so forth. But my experience from my PhD was that voting in a focus group doesn't really add that much value, because your focus group is normally quite small. And because you don't have Likert scales and things like that, which you can then statistically analyze at the end of the day, it just sort of gives you a first order impression. So that's why I didn't go into more detail on that, but you must just be aware that there are mathematical voting techniques. But in the Delphi, your mathematical voting techniques are actually quite nice. All right, so the differences is face-to-face versus you sit by yourself in a Delphi, because you're sitting in front of your computer and there's nobody else that influences you. In the NGT, the nominal group technique, we had verbal discussion and we had verbal clarification of the ideas. Do you remember that? Whereas in the Delphi, everything is written. So you can also have clarification of ideas, but it happens in a written format. And then, as we've already said, that it's about getting everybody in one place or having them all over the world. Okay, so the main objectives of the Delphi is to ensure that all possible options are identified. Remember, that's also what we try to do with the focus group, but here it's now in writing. And you also then want to estimate the impact and the consequences of the different options. And you want to examine and estimate the acceptability of the options. Because remember, we can come up with beautiful measures of success, but if we cannot at the end of the day say how are we going to measure that, it's really useless. Okay. So Delphi gives you the opportunity by using various scales to be able to look at importance and to look at acceptability or measurability.
Sorry, can I ask a question? This think there is a link between what we're discussing now and what we've done in our research. I've concluded that the success is in the data collection method and the follow-up. Because if I collect data, for example, for a community project, and there's follow-ups, without the data collection and specific keywords, I won't determine success.
Yes.
So success wasn't standing out and shouting at me. Am I drawing the right lines in between this and that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes. In something like what we're busy with in the community service project, you would probably end up doing a longitudinal study, because you would say every 6 months go and measure the success. Okay. But what we're busy with now is just to develop those measures of success that we're going to eventually use every 6 months. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay, so it's also used to explore or expose underlying assumptions or information leading to different judgments. It's to seek out information which might generate consensus. It correlates informed judgments on topics spanning a wide range of disciplines, and it educates respondent groups as to diverse interrelated aspects of the topic. So just as, remember when we did the focus group, there was education that happened in terms of that some of you saw factors as measures, all right? Exactly the same thing would happen in a focus, in a Delphi study, because you would get the same type of situation where you would ask for measures and people would give you factors, and you would then have to explain to them in writing, but those are not factors, measures, those are factors. Okay, and it's used to increase the knowledge about the subject or field under study. It confirms or corrects the basis of information, and it establishes priorities and provides means of disseminating expert opinion. Okay, because there's various ways in which you can get expert opinion, but at the end of the day, getting it in writing is always the first prize, because then those people have distilled their thoughts for you on paper. Because if you think about it, if I ask you, what is your problem of the research that you're writing your proposal on? You're going to start in Cape Town and then come to Gauteng, all right? Because it's verbal. Whereas when you write it down, you have to think about it in a lot more detail so that you can distill it, all right, and crystallize it. So there's an advantage in asking experts to crystallize their opinions.
Is that why we did literature review? So the initial problem statement from our industry.
Yes.
Then we did a literature review.
Yes.
We saw methods and all those lovely
Yes.
things. And now, so our introduction then has actually 2 parts.
Yes.
That's wonderful. I was struggling with that because I wanted to, draw the line right through and make sure it comes from, the work and then the literature review.
Okay, and then if you decide to use Delphi in your research, you have to make sure that you have enough time. And as we've already said, the participants must be able to write, and they must have a certain level of skill in written communication. So it would be very difficult to do a Delphi study with grade 7 learners, for example, because they haven't learned the skill yet of expressing themselves in writing. Right. And you also need high participant motivation, because with the Delphi, and we'll get to that now, there's more than one round. And so if your participants are not really interested and are not really motivated to take part, they're not going to keep on returning your questionnaires. And so you have to somehow motivate participants. So normally the motivation is in the fact that they're interested in the results of the study. Okay, so if you pick a topic that is like so boring and nobody is really interested, then you are going to have more difficulty, but with any type of questionnaire, but especially with the Delphi, to gather data. Okay, and the thing about qualitative methods is people think that qualitative is easy, you know, because it's about getting as much data as possible, etc., etc. But what they forget is that you still have to follow a rigorous research process. Okay, so you still have to make sure that you're sampling the population. So although it's qualitative and your sample can be smaller, you still have to understand what the population is. You still have to do piloting procedures. So in a Delphi, you might have one qualitative question, but you still have to make sure before you send the question to your actual respondents that is nicely worded grammatically, that it's understandable, that it's unambiguous, etc., etc. So just because you're doing qualitative work does not mean that you suddenly don't have research rigor. Okay. And also there has to be reliability. So reliability is about, if I repeat the study with similar participants, am I going to get a similar answer? All right. And that's where the definition of your expert is so important. Okay, and so rigor, whatever, did examine some dissertations that used the Delphi method, and what he found was the following weaknesses. And so obviously when you design your research, you want to try and avoid these weaknesses. So absence of open-ended first round questionnaire, inadequate response rate. Okay, so the literature says that 7 is sort of the minimum, but then you get some studies that have 4, and then you have to question, you know, are you really answering anything, or are you really getting the complete picture? Absence of piloting procedures that we've discussed, failure to establish questionnaire reliability. So is it repeatable? Failure to survey dropouts. So if you do a Delphi and people stop responding to the study, ask them why. Is it because they think that there's a flaw in the study, because that's a problem, or is it because they don't have time? Or is it because they don't want to share their expertise anymore, or there might be several reasons. Okay. And then you find any method that you use, you have to be critical about it, and you have to understand what is it giving you, what type of answer is it giving you. And you cannot just take the answer and now say, because I determined that people in Russia prefer to play ping pong with pink ping pong balls, I cannot now generalize it and say everybody in the world prefers to play ping pong with pink ping pong balls. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, and that's the case with any method, but especially with Delphi, people just say, okay, this is the process, let's follow the process, and there's the answer. But you have to critically analyze, is this the correct answer? And so that's why normally when you do a Delphi, you will support it with another method as well. All right? So you might start with a focus group, then do a Delphi, then do a case study. Or you might have a Delphi and then a questionnaire, or you understand what I'm saying. So you can mix up all the various methods because they each have a place and they each have an application. And then the other thing is that there can be a problem in role bias. So you have selected this person as an expert in water studies, okay? But actually, this person works for the Department of Water Affairs, and so he is biasing the output of the study towards what the wisdom of the Department of Water Affairs is, rather than what he as an individual expert feels. Do you hear what I'm saying? All right. Okay. So somebody wants me. No. Let me just make them go away. Okay, and the other thing is that, as I've said, Delphi has several rounds, and the problem is the more rounds you have, the more fatigued your panelists are going to become. So they might still be interested in the first and second round, but by the time you get to the 10th round, you probably are not going to get many questionnaires back, right? So when you design it, you have to try and minimize the number of rounds that you follow. Okay, so panel selection, as we've discussed, is important. It's about who is the expert. And you will get better results if your panel feels personally involved with the problem. So they must be interested in the results of the study. They also must have pertinent information to share, because if they are not really experts, so like the criticism that one of you guys said when we did the focus group of, I really don't know why BTEC students must look at this problem. Yes, that was very pertinent, because you probably don't have the right information. But the reason I did with the focus group with you was to show you how it works. Okay? But yes, at the end of the day, you didn't really have pertinent information to share. All right. So they must also be motivated to add the Delphi to their tasks. Everyone is busy these days. Everyone has too much work to do. So make sure that the people are prepared to give you an hour of their time, and don't lie to them. Tell them from the beginning it's going to be a Delphi. I think that there will be 3 rounds. Each questionnaire is going to take you an hour to complete. Are you prepared to take part? Because that makes it clear from the beginning. And they must feel that the output of the Delphi will include information that they will value. So you need individuals with prior experience with the issue at hand, and that's a critical factor of success. And he also concludes that only participants with prior experience are both willing and able to exert control over the process. So if you are getting like wishy-washy inputs and people are not completing the whole questionnaire and they're not really adding factors and so on and so forth, then your panel is probably not the correct panel to use. All right, so here is a lot of stuff about the different sample sizes, but the important thing is that in the latest studies, the optimum size is 7 to 12 participants. Okay.
That's predetermined.
Well, that's what, because look, you get people that do research on research, all right, on research methods, and so the latest wisdom in terms of research on Delphis and the basically what they say is after you add a 13th person, you're not getting new knowledge. So it's all about saturation. Okay. So, for example, if you remember last year when we did the closeout, the closeout with the nominal group technique, there were 50 of you in the class. And so when I started sticking the papers up, there was like big clusters of the same information. Okay? And that means that we've reached saturation because the same ideas keep on coming up. And so when you do your masters, the same thing happens when you read articles. because you know that you've read enough articles when all the articles that you are now reading are telling you the same thing. So you're not learning anything new. Okay, and so that's the same thing with your empirical research. Especially when you're doing qualitative studies, as soon as you are not getting any new information, you know that you've reached saturation. And remember, with a focus group, I said the same thing, that it depends on how many people in the focus group, but you start maybe with 2 little bits of paper, and then after you've clustered them, you say to them, okay, is there anything else that you want to add? And then you cluster them, and then you give them several opportunities, and when you've reached saturation is when they start giving you the same information but just using different words. Okay, sorry, let me just switch this thing to silent before it starts ringing. Okay. All right. So as we've already discussed, it's important to pilot your questionnaire. So like in the one study done by Jilson, she actually deleted an entire section after the piloting. So piloting is done with people that have a similar profile to the panel that you want to select. And you're not allowed to use people on your panel to pilot the questionnaire, because then they're going to be biased. All right. So you always have to find similar people, so 3, say, similar people that can look at the questionnaire, and preferably people that will be honest with you and will give you constructive feedback and say to you, this question is really not making sense, or what exactly do you mean by that? And also in a Delphi questionnaire, piloting helps you to determine how long it takes to fill in the questionnaire. And in my study for my PhD, the one in my first round, I had a very long questionnaire. Okay, and the questionnaire, I said to the respondents, would take 1 hour to complete. And so one of the respondents wrote as a comment, I have now spent an hour and I was only prepared to give you an hour, and so this is the end of my participation. You understand? So yeah, people take these things quite seriously. So piloting helps you to also determine how long it takes to complete the questionnaire. You also have to establish the definitions of consensus, and we'll talk about that a bit more in the slides that follow. You have to identify the participants, and you have to get agreement from them that they are going to take part in your study. So with my study, where I was looking at the selection of renewable energy technologies in Africa, I identified 53 people that I decided, according to my criteria of experts, were experts in the field, right? And I then sent all of them an email, and I told them, this is the study that I'm doing, and are you prepared to participate? And at the end, I think I got 15 back that said, okay, they're prepared to participate. And then of that 15, only 7 participated through the rest of the study. Okay. So especially with a Delphi, but even with survey questionnaire where it's self-administered and you send it out electronically, it's very difficult to get people to respond. Okay, so even there, to get agreement beforehand is very often helpful, but people don't often do that. But with a Delphi, it's essential because of the fact that you're talking about such a small sample. And so if you only get 6 people that respond, your data isn't usable. So you have to keep on top of them, and you have to make sure people agree to respond.
So that's why people are on our cases when they're doing the master's degree.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, so when you get one of these questionnaires for somebody doing a study, if you have time, please complete it. Because one day you might want to do your study and then you want people to complete yours. Okay. So, okay, and then, okay, so then you post the questionnaire. So you send the questionnaire out to your respondents, and they then rate the items in your questionnaire. And then there's individual feedback through provision of numerical data and a summary of written comments from participants and re-rating. So the participants will give you information, and you will then take that information and you will summarize it, and in the second round you will send the respondent a report, and the report will say this is what the findings were from the first round. And the reason for that is that you want people to critically engage with the comments made by other people so that they might change their opinion, or they might strengthen their opinion to the opposite. Okay, because that's what you after. You after engagement. Okay, so this is basically what a two-round Delphi would look like. So, as I said, one of the ways that one can do a Delphi. Where is now my? One of the ways in which one can do a Delphi is you can combine it with a focus group. So you ask the first qualitative question in the focus group, and you then use the output of that focus group as the input to your first questionnaire. Right? Oh, they can be loud. Right. So in the first round, you would have to identify your participant characteristics. So let's say that we want to do a Delphi study with the donors to Kliptown. How are we going to identify them?
Identify
the donors that donate money to Kliptown. So we're saying that as one part of the measures of success, the opinion of the donors is important, okay, for their opinion on what the measures of success should be. And because of the fact that they are sitting all over the world, the Delphi would be a method that could work. So how will we identify characteristics for these participants? What would they look like?
Most would be educated, post-matric qualification, the way they answer the questions.
Okay, but what I'm after is the definition of an expert. So how am I going to decide whether this person actually has expert information to contribute to the study?
You can say, like, if you are a donor, well, you don't have money, so I will look at your business or your financial business.
Okay. Okay, so maybe one of the things you would look at is how, or you might set a threshold and say only people that contribute more than 100,000 Rand a year to the project are going to be part of the study. Okay, because we don't want the people that contribute 100 Rand here and 500 Rand there and whatever, because those are not the people's, they are not the experts. Okay. Another thing might be that you might say, okay, to how many other projects do you donate? Because that also gives you an idea of the profile of the expert. And you might say, okay, we are only going to target people that contribute to at least 2 projects. Okay, because they now have a comparison that they can do. Does that make sense? Okay, so this first step to identify participant characteristics is where you say, this is what an expert is for my study. Then the next step of identify possible participants is where you then take the database of Kliptown, where they have the list of their donors, and you look at which of these people are donating more than 100,000 a year to the project. And you then write them a letter and say, are you prepared to take part in my study, and how many projects do you support? Okay, and then those that write back and say, yes, I'm prepared to take part in your study and I support 2 projects or 5 projects or whatever, those would then be the ones that you will send the questionnaire to. Okay, and then in parallel to that, because this can be, and this is quite a cumbersome process, especially when you are dealing with getting international experts together, because it's slow, because it's via email, and you sometimes don't even have numbers for the people, and you know what I mean. So in parallel to that, you then generate your first questionnaire. Okay, and here, remember, we're busy with a qualitative study. So you have a nicely worded, open-ended question. But what you can do, if you go from a focus group to a Delphi study, you can already focus your answer more by using the outputs that you got from the focus group. Okay? So if you were really... okay, so let's say that for Kliptown, I sit down with, or I do a focus group with the managers of the Kliptown project, and I say to them, how do you think we should measure success? And I do what I did with you guys, but with them, all right? They will probably come up with quite good measures because they understand the project and they are very intimately involved in the project. So I then say to the donors, right, here are the measures that we have already identified. Rate these measures on a Likert scale. And remember, we said that when we do a Delphi study, we normally have a Likert scale in terms of importance. So how important is this measure? But then also in terms of practicality. So is it possible to measure this measure? All right. But because it is a Delphi and because it's qualitative, I always put a place on my questionnaire where I say to the respondents, is there anything else that you want to add? All right. Okay. So then you generate the first questionnaire, you pilot it. We've discussed piloting. Is everyone happy with piloting? Do you understand what that means? Okay.
So in the piloting, you're saying in the Kliptown example, you would have to find other people similar to the experts that you would have identified in Kliptown elsewhere, though.
Yes. That will understand what it's about. So in that example, you might know people that donate over 100,000 to projects, not necessarily the Kliptown project, and you can then ask them because they will have an understanding of measures of community project success. Does that make sense?
But how do you? So you would also have to ask them if they want to participate and then send them questionnaires and things like that. Yes.
And normally it's better when you pilot to use people that you know personally a bit better, because then they will be open. Yeah. Okay. And of course, part of the piloting, you also use your supervisor. Because your supervisor should know enough about the topic, otherwise they won't be able to supervise you. And if you have a statistician that's involved, you make sure that it's gone through proper grammar and spell checking, and all of that thing, so that your instrument is good. And because if I get one of these M&D studies that come through my emails. the first spelling mistake I get to, I stop reading, literally. Because then I feel, but why must I give this person my time if they haven't gone to the trouble of sending me something which is good? You know what I'm saying? Because I feel that I'm wasting my time taking part in a study that's not well designed. And so if it's well designed, by all means, I will participate. But if it's not well designed, I'm not interested. And I think a lot of people feel like that. Okay. So it's not literally the first spelling mistake, but you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so then you administer the first questionnaire. So in other words, you send it out to the people. You can use a tool like SurveyMonkey. I can show you now how that would typically work. And then, so you ask the people to please fill in the questionnaire within the next month or the next 2 weeks or however long you've given for the study. And then you analyze the data, all right? And so part of the analysis of the data is if you have already put measures, you analyze how people have rated those measures, but then because there's always an open-ended part, you then also discuss in that analysis what does the open-ended part mean. So people have now added measures. So does that mean that they must be added, or are these measures already described in another measure and maybe we should re-describe that measure or whatever? Okay, so actually let me continue recording. Last year, and what we did last year was we looked at the measures of project success in South Africa. Right, and I'm going to make this document available to you as well. Because unfortunately this year, because I was sick and I didn't see you regularly enough, I couldn't do this part which I did last year. Okay, sorry, I'm in the wrong subject. I want to be in PJR. No, where did I? No. No, man, I'm sorry that I'm now. Oh, I must be in 2012 if I want to find last year's. Hey, okay. Okay, so these are the results of the combined Delphi, and I'm going to make this report available to you because when I wrote the report, I used it to teach as well. Okay, so when you write an actual Delphi report, you wouldn't do it in as much detail as I've done it, because part of the purpose of this was to teach as well. All right. So let me just get to the document. Okay, so there were two research questions. So the one was, how should we measure individual project success in South Africa? And the other one was, what are the factors that contribute to project success in South Africa? So the students went through the same exercise that you went through, that they first had to read about project success, and they had to do a group literature review on project success. And then I did a focus group with the evening students, and I did a focus group with the block students. And then for each of these groups, we generated a questionnaire. All right, and I'll just give you an idea of what the questionnaire looks like. Where do I log in now? Oh, there. And if you ever end up doing your masters, please remember that SurveyMonkey is your best friend. Because even when you do qualitative, it's a very good place to accumulate your data. So, for example, these forms that you fill in for me, I read them into SurveyMonkey, or my assistant reads them into SurveyMonkey, and I then get a spreadsheet out of it that summarizes the data. Okay, and you can see this is all the exciting stuff that's happening in our faculty at the moment. And I think that's the one I want to show you. No. That's page 4, so it'll probably be on page 3. Oh, now did I use... Sorry, I have 2 accounts with SurveyMonkey, because I had one when I was at Tikkies, and then I have one here, and I think that I probably used the Tikkies one. Hold on, let me just see. Okay. Alright, so this was generated on SurveyMonkey, which is the program that I just showed you, but I then downloaded it in a PDF format. But this is what the survey looked like. So it states the question and whatever, and if you're doing a master's and a PhD, there you have to say that it's for a master's and a PhD, and that who is your supervisor and all of that. There's a set format that you follow for any university. So if you do it at TUT, there's a set format that you have to follow. Okay, and then the important thing is that you always have to have informed consent. So that means that if you are doing an electronic survey, there has to be a place where the person says, yes, I agree to participate, right? Or where a person says, no, I don't want to participate. And so for my students, they had to participate. So I can't really use the output of that because they were forced to participate. So there wasn't informed consent in the sense that they didn't have a choice, because they had to give me their student number, not so that I could track who said what, because remember, anonymity is an important part of any questionnaire and any research that you do. Because especially, say for example, I'm doing research on how often the students in my class have sex a week, all right? So, okay, and so say there's only 2 girls in the class, okay? So in this case, there's only 3 boys in the class, all right? So now, if I ask a question like, what is your gender? All right, and so now I know, okay, there are 3 boys, so it's one of these 3 said this, okay? And then I ask on top of that, what is your home language? Okay, so probably the 3 of you have different home languages, okay? And I know Tinus's home language is Afrikaans. So I can pinpoint and say, but Tina said that. So do you see that, and that's why questionnaires that get done by students at the university have to go through ethical clearance, because the ethical panel will pick up things like that. Okay, because in the description of this, or in your proposal, you will say, okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so my sample is the 10 students, so it's actually a census because it's all 10 students in my class, but there's 3 boys and 7 girls, and these are the questions I'm going to ask. All right, that will immediately come back from the ethics committee because they will say you are exposing the students to risk of being identified. All right, so you must always not be able to identify people. Right, and so that doesn't mean that you can't ask, like for example, I normally tell my students right at the end, ask the participants would they like a summarized result of the study, and then ask them to put in their email address if they're interested in that. But then, as the researcher, it is your responsibility to make sure that you do not link that to what they've said, and you actually keep those two things completely separate. Okay, and if you are doing research in your organization, you know, it's very important that if you promise people anonymity, that you do not make your raw data available to anybody, say in management or in HR or anywhere where they can actually identify participants, because then you are not respecting the privacy of your participants. Okay, right. So you can see this was the demographic information I asked them. So I'm a practicing project manager, my highest qualification, the discipline of my highest qualification, the number of years work experience, the number of years project management experience, and the type of organization. And then they had to put in their student number. Right. So this you would not do in a normal study. But I had to do it here because I had to make sure that they all participate, because that was the purpose of it. Right. And okay, and then you can see here what we did was we did the focus group, and in the focus group, these were the measures of success that we came up with. So the project scope as defined in the project charter is met. That was, we said that was an important factor. This is measure. Okay. So okay. So at the end of the project, you measure whether the scope that was defined in the project charter has been met. Right? So we talked about importance. So how important is it that we do that? And then we also said how feasible is it to do that? Because if you look at something like the end product of the project is fully utilized, it's probably important that the end product is utilized. But how easy is it to measure? So how feasible is it to have that as one of the measures? Do you understand what I'm saying? So like for example with Gautrain, maybe that's not a good example because before the Gautrain was implemented, everybody said it's going to be a white elephant and nobody's going to use it. Now I hear that they've actually introduced an 8-car train during rush hours because they're being utilized so much. Okay, so it's feasible, but it's not feasible right at the end of the project. It's only feasible later on. Okay, and so if I go back to my okay, and I'm going to give you this report, and please read through it because you're going to learn a lot out of it. But okay, so these were the measures that were identified from the focus group, and this is very important, that when you have a Likert scale, especially in a Delphi study, where you actually want consensus, so people must have the same understanding of what is very important. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because if I show you a photograph of there are more girls in the class than boys, of Roger Moore, for example, and I say to you, you know, how handsome do you think that he is? Okay, my measure of very handsome is going to be different to Mbali's measure of very handsome. Do you agree with me? And I might be a perfectionist, so in my eyes, I will never say that somebody is very handsome. Okay, because to me, very handsome is a Greek god and is a mythical thing, and you only get it in a painting. You can never get it in a photograph. Okay, so it can only be in somebody's imagination. Whereas Mbali has lower standards than I. So you know, I don't know, who do you think is very handsome?
My husband.
Okay, so she thinks her husband is very handsome. Okay, but and so there might be several men that she thinks is very handsome, not because, you know, she wants to have a relationship with them, but just because we all have eyes. Okay, so whereas for me, no man that I see is very handsome, so I will never rate somebody as very handsome. So when you are doing a questionnaire where you send out, where you get like 500 respondents, that type of bias is filtered out by the fact that of the bulk of it. You understand? Whereas when you are busy with qualitative research, where you have a smaller sample size, if everybody does not have the same understanding of the measuring scale, it makes your data a lot less reliable. Okay, so that's why you have to say it is crucial that this measure be used to determine project success. So again, it's subjective, because at the end of the day, we might not all have the same, or say that the same thing is crucial. Okay, but at least we have the same understanding of what does very important mean. Does that make sense? Okay, and so you will see there's that for importance, and then there's the same thing for feasible. Okay, so with feasibility in terms of the factors, we spoke about it's not feasible to say that this is a factor for project success if it is not possible to do anything about it. Okay, so let's say something like the emotional intelligence of project managers. If we say that that is an important factor for project success, the literature tells us that that is something that you can improve by sending people on training. Right? If we say the IQ of project managers is an important factor for project success, the literature mostly says you cannot really improve IQ. So do you get what I'm trying to say? So it's not feasible to say that IQ is a factor for project success, because there's nothing I can do about it. Okay, I can hire smarter people maybe, but if I'm stuck with these are the project managers, and normally you want to try and improve what you have. All right, so those things that I cannot improve, you know, is not feasible. Right, so then as you saw on the questionnaire, they then had to rate the different factors that we'd identified. And then the interesting thing is, I've gone through the whole analysis and how you do it and all of this. Now, this part of it, guys, where I go through the process of how to analyze the data, I'm not going to ask you in the exam. Right, so this is for your information, but please read through it because it's interesting. Because Delphi is a tool that can be used quite nicely in an organization to also solve an organizational problem. Because the other reason why I put emphasis on making sure that you guys can do Delphis and can do focus groups is because those are two tools that are very helpful for project managers in organizations. So they're not just for research. Okay, yes?
Is it because it's structured in a certain way? And it takes into consideration behavioral...
Yes.
Is that one?
Yes, and the other thing is because in South Africa we don't have that many experts.
Okay.
So like if in say we want to know what is the factors of success in defense projects. In America, you will have a population of 10,000 that you can ask. Whereas in South Africa, you probably have a population of 500 that you can ask. Do you see the thing? And then also if you are working, so an organization like the CSR, which has about say 3,000 employees in the different disciplines, a similar organization like that in America would have 10,000 employees. So it's much easier to do quantitative type of surveys there where you want a lot of sample and than in South Africa. Because in certain areas there are maybe only 7 experts. and also then in your organization, to find 7 experts is going to be easier than to ask 100 people that don't actually have pertinent information to your problem. And that's why I emphasize these qualitative techniques. All right, so please read through it and see how it works. But at the end of the day, what we then end up with is for each factor, I'll have to just make it a bit smaller so it fits. Okay, so what we end up at the end of the day is we end up with a group score for each factor. And we have a group score for importance and a group score for feasibility. And there were thresholds that we set in terms of which are then the top factors. And you can see that, do you see that the feasibility line runs below the importance line? Okay? And that's interesting because you might think it's important when you first look at it, but then when I ask you, but how are you going to implement it? You say, okay, that's maybe a little bit more difficult. Okay, and so the Delphi then gives you tools and techniques which help you to identify what are then the top factors, but we've taken importance and feasibility into account. All right. And then at the end of the day, we then look at which of them are highly important and highly feasible. And these are then the top measures that we will then go further with. All right. And this report would be the typical type of report which you would then give to your participants, so they can see where the ratings ended up. And then you will also see that in the questionnaire there was a space here to indicate up to 5 more measures of success that you think should be used. Because remember, this is qualitative and it has to be open-ended. And so it might be that in the focus group we missed something. And the first round of the Delphi especially, we want to get as much information as possible. And then if we go to the report, you will see that the students added, let me just get to that part. Oh, I think I put that in the appendix because this thing was getting too long. Okay, so you will see here they added new measures in that place where I said add up to 5 new measures. And then you can see that I then have to say, what am I going to do with this measure? And in terms of time, this was a new measure, and so we worded it. And this is where you, as the researcher, have to engage with the topic, and you have to decide how to then word it. And so I decided that the project is delivered according to the agreed schedule. It's how I'm going to word that one. Right. The benefits of the project. So we said financial benefits are already a measure, social and environmental benefits to be added. So I had to carefully look and say, but okay, I've already put financial benefits, so what else is missing, right? And so that would be social and environmental, and then you can see 2 measures were then added at the end of the day. Okay, and then of course all of these measures are then put onto the second round Delphi survey. Let me hope that I have a second round, first round. Oh no, I've only got the results. Sorry, I don't have the questionnaire. But so all of the measures that are then top measures go over to the second round, as well as any measures that are added. And then you ask the people to rate again. Close this. Okay, and this is then what the data looks like when it comes out of SurveyMonkey. So you can see it's quite daunting the first time you download this data and you then have to start engaging with it.
Taxonomy.
Sorry?
I'm thinking taxonomy when I look at that.
Yes.
And pivot tables.
Yes. Okay, and so here you can see I've then taken out just the measures, right, and highly feasible. And the thing is, as a researcher, you would look at this data because it starts giving you an idea of the trends and about what people are saying. And then I've worked out the group scores. So again, you can see this one, the financial benefits of the project are according to the original plan, turned out not to be one of the top measures. Okay. And here, project stakeholders are satisfied with the project feasibility. Okay, so project stakeholders are satisfied with the project was found to be important, but when I asked, is it easy to measure? They said no. All right, so do you see that the type of data and the level of data that you get is very different to if you've sent out 500 questionnaires, right? Because you have to engage with this and you have to interpret this. Okay, so are you comfortable that you understand how a Delphi works and how you would set it up, etc., etc.? But I will make this report available to you because it really does explain it in a lot of detail. Okay, so I just want to see. Okay, then there's a whole lot written about the rounds, but the main thing is that you try and limit the rounds so that you don't get respondent fatigue. And most Delphis have 2 rounds because that's normally the most effective way of doing it, and it's only really if you have a captive audience. so say there's a specific problem in your organization that you want to solve. People will probably be more willing to go through more rounds because they will see that there's a benefit to their specific to your specific organization. And that's why this is a very important tool for project managers to use. Because not all organizations that we work in are co-located. So we've got a Cape Town office and a Durban office and a Joburg office, and there a Delphi can work very well to try and solve a problem. Okay, and then there are also some. It depends on what you are trying to achieve with your Delphi. If you want everybody to buy in to the result, then you want to get to consensus. So everybody must agree. Okay, but that's not always the purpose of a Delphi. Like, for example, with the Delphi that I did about the project success with the students, I just wanted to see what are the top factors. And so at the end of the day, everybody is not going to agree, but there is enough, there were enough respondents and there was enough measurement to say, okay, these are probably the top factors. But to give you an example, and that's why one very rarely uses a Delphi as the be-all and end-all and stand-alone. Because what happened in my PhD was I started with a focus group. I took the factors that came out of the focus group and I designed my Delphi Round 1 survey from that. Then they rated and they added. I then did the report. I then gave them another chance to rate. And out of that, there were 11 factors that came out as the most important factors for the selection of renewable energy projects in Africa. Then the next step was a case study. All right. So I then went to Tanzania, Rwanda, and Malawi, and I spoke to people that worked in the NGOs that were implementing the projects. I spoke to government officials that were busy implementing the projects, and I also spoke to the users, so the ground, the people on the ground. And I'll tell you more about that now when we talk about the case study. And the interesting thing was that the 11 factors that were identified during the Delphi as important turned out to be important. But there were 2 factors that didn't come out of the Delphi that I had to add because they came up again and again in the case study. All right. So that's why you try and because every methodology that you use, you're shining a different torch on the object. So think about this bottle is in the dark, all right, and so it's completely dark, and I shine. Does this thing's torch work? Okay, and I shine my torch on this part of it, so on the top part of it, and I ask you, what is it? Okay, you'll tell me it's some other spray, because you can see it's got a nozzle, whatever. And if I say then to you, what type of a spray? You're going to say, I don't know. You know, it's maybe a hand spray, or it looks like my mist that I use on my face. Okay. But then if I illuminate it from another angle, you will see, oh, okay, it looks as if it's a clear liquid, right? So that maybe gives me a different perspective or more information. And then if I light the front of it, you can see exactly what it is, all right? But in research, we use different methodologies so that we can look at the same objects or the same problem from different angles, so that we can then put that together to try and get to a solution. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so this is about the rounds. Then we've already spoken about anonymity. And in Delphi's you get various levels of anonymity. These silly people. So you get very rigid, where the panel members don't know. So Mbali is part of the Delphi, but she doesn't know that Pumzile is also part of the Delphi. She just knows that there's other experts, but she doesn't know who those experts are. Okay, and I also don't know who the experts are. Okay, so you can see that is a very rigid level of anonymity, and that's quite difficult to achieve, because I would then have to get somebody else to communicate with you so that I don't know who you are. Right, so like the students this morning had a problem, and they said there's a problem with entrepreneurship. And so I said to them, okay, send your problems through to the class representative, and class representative copy and paste those comments for me into a document, but don't identify who said it. Right, otherwise they're not going to give me feedback. Okay, so that's keeping anonymity. Right, then there's essential anonymity. So that's where you guys don't know who each other are, but I know who you are. And then sometimes you can have a study where parts of your study are face-to-face. Right, so you can combine a Delphi, or make one of your Delphi rounds a focus group. Okay, but those are very controversial. So if you decide to do that, there is a precedent for it in the literature, but you have to then motivate why for your specific study that's very important. Okay, then we've spoken about questionnaire design, so I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can read it. Can you all read? I think we determined you can all read. Was it John was in your class last year? Hey,
Who's John?
not. Oh, okay. Last year in the evening class, the first class, when I asked, can everybody read? One of the guys put up his hand and said, no, we can't. And his name was John. So John was always picked on when I said, you guys can read, can't you? Okay. Okay, and so we've spoken about the first round is open-ended and closed questions. And then when you go into, and then you always try and motivate the people. So with any questionnaire, you try and motivate the people to respond. And sometimes you have to define certain things, okay? Because sometimes in certain fields, you know, if I say use the word RAM, if I send it to you and you're a computer scientist, you're going to see it as random access memory. If you're a project manager, hopefully you'll know it's a responsibility allocation matrix. Okay, so anything like that, which there can be duplicity or there can be more than one interpretation, you then have to explain, this is what I mean by it. Okay. And also to define what are the central concepts. So in this whole thing about project success and measures of success and factors of success, you would then have a page where you would say, okay, this is what we mean when we say factors. Those are the things that lead to success at the end of the day, and measures are how do we determine whether it was successful. You understand, right? Did you have a question? Oh, you were just waving at me. Okay, and then this is just as applicable to. Oh, okay. This is just as applicable to survey research. You must just please catch up on case studies then, because I'm going to do case studies next. Right. Okay, so the completion time of any research instrument is very, very important. So if you are going to interview people and you say to them, can I have 6 hours of your time? No. All right. Can I have an hour of your time? Maybe. Do you understand? And so exactly the same here. And you can see in Gilson's study, which was like one of the first seminal studies using a Delphi, the medium time, so most people completed in 2.5 hours, but the maximum time was 10 hours. And I know that from my Delphi, one respondent said it took them 5 hours. So yeah, that guy was really nice. But you can see that qualitative research does take more time, because it's not just tick, 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 tick. You actually have to think, and you actually have to add. And if your experts are taking the study seriously and they're really trying to help you, that they will spend the time and they will add the information. Okay, and this is all in the paper, but I will not examine you on this part. Okay, so the red part in the slides, you don't have to study. I've just put it there so that it is complete, and if you ever want to do a Delphi study, at least you have something to refer back to. Okay. All right, so that is